Good morning, and welcome to this episode of the Strengthening Community podcast. Mike, it is good to see you as the co-host. How are you doing over there?
Good to see you as well, Mark. Excited to be part of this podcast today. Podcast number 3 for me.
Yes.
And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed every episode so far, so I'm looking forward to this one as well.
The next 2 months, this episode and the next episode, we're going to do a 2-part series entitled Reimagining Recovery. This time of year, there's lots of awareness months, awareness days, events where we're bringing attention to the issues of addiction and mental health and recovery. So there's lots of attention being given to some of these struggles that people experience in our community. These are things that impact the entire community. They affect all of us in some way. Some of us, we experience it ourselves. Some of it, we experience it with loved ones or friends or coworkers. But everywhere we go in the community, we're impacted by the struggles that people have among us. And so we really want to focus in this episode and next month's episode on recovery. And we're going to reimagine it by looking at it through the community lens. Like, how do we do this together? How do we live in a brave space together with each other? And so we're going to unpack that. This month, this episode, we're going to talk about addiction and recovery. Next month, we're going to talk about mental health and recovery. There's a lot of overlap between those two things. Recovery is recovery. But we're going to focus in a little bit on some of the nuances of the differences between those two things in each month. We have a really good panelist here, a panel of guys here. These are guys that I've known for a while. And I have to say, before we even get started, this is probably the best collection of tattoos in a podcast that I've seen. I have some, but I'm inspired to up my game a little bit in that regard. So, do you guys just want to introduce yourself just real quickly?
My name is Ivan Rosa. I work for Access Services. I double as a crisis worker and a lead overdose response worker. The program that I'm working for, I have the honor of being able to serve people that are right in the midst of their overdose, right? The overdose happens, we get in front of them, we try to offer them services and connect them to services. I've been doing this for quite some time, whether it's been with Access or in Philadelphia, I'm going to say for the last 10 years. And it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's also connected to my walk and to my faith, going out there and seeking out the people that needed help and bringing those resources to them. So I really enjoy what I do, and I'm honored to be here on this podcast.
Thank you, Ivan. John, how about you?
Hi, I'm John Niarhos. I'm retired for 2 years now. I've been a volunteer at Pottstown Beacon of Hope for the past 5 years, and I spent some time in Philly, about 8 years serving at a church for the homeless, and also spent many years in recovery.
Nice. Thanks, John. Ryan.
Hey, I'm Ryan Schweiger. I am a person in long-term recovery, and I work as the community outreach specialist for the organization St. Luke's Penn Foundation, a behavioral health organization. Serving mainly Bucks and Montgomery County, but we get individuals in our inpatient drug and alcohol rehab from all over the place. But yeah, I try to build relationships within the communities that we serve and find the needs. How can I help you, and how can you help me, right?
Thanks, guys. One of the things that I think is really powerful about what you guys bring to this conversation is there's lived experience. You know what it's like to go through this thing and to be in recovery. From an individual point of view, you're also involved with other services or supports that people use and find in their recovery. And so you have that sense as well. And then all of you have sort of a bigger sense of your purpose in the community. And so all of those levels are really important to this conversation. But let's just start with maybe a question about addiction and how we perceive it in the community. Historically, I think people have looked at addiction as an individual thing. This is a problem that a person has. Sometimes it's been characterized as an illness. Sometimes it's been characterized as sort of a character character issue or a moral flaw or at least a series of very poor life decisions that needs to be corrected. Do you guys think that that's sort of a prevailing idea now, or is there, did the opioid crisis, the epidemic of that, change people's ideas about what addiction is about, or is that a prevalent part of the way the public itself sort of notices this issue?
I mean, we see all kinds of, substance use that is going on in the community, right? Like, I'm sure if you're a person who's in recovery and you're connected to a recovery community, you're seeing it from all angles. Individuals who aren't just using opioids that are, struggling or getting connected to finding what we call recovery, or if you're working professionally too, right? Like you're seeing, we see all kinds of substances that individuals are using and struggling with addiction. I think as far as from the community's perspective, the opioid epidemic or whatever we want to call it has definitely brought a lot of stuff to the forefront. But like this has been going on for a long time. People using drugs and struggling with addiction in the community. It's been going on forever, right? With every person that struggles with substance use, there's other people that are connected to that person, right? A family member, a friend, a coworker. There's always this ripple effect that substance use has on not just the person, but other people that they're connected with and the community. So what I find being out and about in the community a lot of times is everyone is connected to this in some way, shape, or form. Everyone. There's always a story. Everyone always has a story, good, bad, or indifferent, around substance use, around addiction, in the community.
My interaction with the community is that over the years, over say the last 15 to 20 years, that more and more people are kind of leaving behind that old school of thinking that's judgmental or critical of people who are struggling with addiction. I'm not so sure that that knowledge is keeping up with that change, but I do know that more and more people are beginning to, to ask questions and to express a lack of understanding. But kind of like what Ryan said, it's so prevalent that they can no longer ignore that it's something bigger than just character flaw or something that you can, nail down with an either or answer. So I see a lot more questioning even from people of generations that normally you wouldn't think would do that. But because, again, like Ryan said, because you can rarely come across anybody who hasn't been touched by it in some way.
Yeah, I feel like, of course, like we all, everyone, and especially depending on the community that you come from, the neighborhood that you come from, you're going to be impacted by addiction. Like if you live in North Philadelphia, Pottstown, Norristown area, it's something that you witnessed as soon as you hit the you go outside your door, it's reality, right? And it's sad because it's become the norm, right? For a kid to walk past somebody in addiction doing drugs, or just walk past somebody in a tent and not even acknowledge that the person is there, right? It's just becoming normalized. And how did we get here as a society? I don't know, but it's hard to see that addiction and homelessness and that kind of degradation is just normal, and people are just okay with walking past. These are humans. These are people. These are people that if you just sit there and listen to their story, they're not that different than you and I. So it depends the lens that you're seeing it from. So if you're seeing it from the lens of the provider, you see it different. If you see it from the lens of a volunteer, you're seeing it different. If you see it from the lens of that kid that lives in the neighborhood that can no longer make a snowball and blames the addict for not being able to come out and play, you're seeing it from a different perspective. If it just depends on what lens you're witnessing, but the reality is that it's in our neighborhoods, it's in our families, it's in our workspaces, and it can, and like Ryan said, it can no longer be ignored.
Yeah, it's helpful to think about the different lenses within our community. I think, Ryan, I was glad that you used the word the ripple effect, because I think that's a very effective way of understanding. It impacts everybody. You might not be in that center, but it'll affect you in some way. One of the things I've noticed is as we've gotten, one of the impacts I think that I've seen in terms of the opioid epidemic, and I realized, to your point, Ryan, addiction has been going on for a really long time, and there's all sorts of drugs involved. But I've known families who have been impacted by that pathway of somebody doing really well, needing surgery or having an accident, ending up on a painkiller, and then that starts the process. And their surprise was, I didn't know that this could happen to us. Like as if. If you do a certain set of things, you're going to be sort of immune from this. And so that's one of the ways that I think, to your point, John, I think there's a growing sense in the community that people want to know, and they want to know more, even if they don't quite understand it.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, I want to say too, so I go into schools a lot and talk to young people in mostly like middle to high school levels, and engaging them around this, what we're talking about, right? Like addiction, substance use, prevention, and also recovery, right? For me, when I talk about prevention, I can't talk about prevention without talking about recovery, because it's a part of who I am. I had to experience this, go through you know what I mean? And so I can't not talk about recovery to these young people too, or the general community, even when I'm talking about just general education around these topics, right? And so what I find interesting too is that I feel like I need to talk about recovery, because if you think about all the people, out there that are impacted by somebody that they care about or love, or know, that struggles with substance use or has struggled with substance use or overdosed and died as a direct result of substance use, all those young people that I'm engaging with, they know someone too. They have a brother or a sister or a mom or a dad or a grandparent or a neighbor or, a friend of the family or someone, right? That they've had that lived experience through that lens, right? Of that perspective of just hearing about it at the dinner table, even. I think, it's important that when we're educating people about this, to know that, to what you were just alluding to, that there's risk factors that play into this too, right? Like pain and injury could be a risk factor to somebody then developing a substance use disorder, an actual dependency to a certain medication, that creates that physical dependency, right? And then to that point, who do you point the finger at, right? It's a risk factor, and it happens. Genetics could be, a risk factor. Mental health can be a risk factor. Trauma, there's all these different risk factors that can contribute to somebody developing, substance use disorder or addiction to different drugs.
Yeah. Mike, I got a question for you. You oversee the transition to independence program, which is, maybe you can describe that real briefly in a sentence or two. But one of the things we've talked about is young people come into this program and they might not share right away that they're struggling with substance use or an addiction, and then a little bit later on it comes up. Do you want to talk just a little bit about how maybe substance use is isolating or disconnecting, and what you've seen in terms of what happens when people can get honest and then you can reconnect them in some way.
The TIP program is a young adult mental health program, serves individuals between 16 and 26 years old with a mental health diagnosis. And basically the concept of the program is to identify future goals, action steps to reach those goals, but really based on navigating decision making based on likely outcomes, also navigating risk and conflict, and normalizing that for people in that stage of life. So like you mentioned, Mark, kind of what we did see in the data as we're kind of collecting information from our youth was that initially at intake, a lot of people aren't disclosing that they're using substances. And then as we build trust, engage with them in a way that lets them know that this is a non-judgmental space, that we're here to freely talk about what some of your motivators are and whatever the circumstances you happen to be in life, decisions that you're making, this is a safe place to share that. Once we've reached that stage, 3 to 6 months in, now the data is showing that a lot more of our youth are connected to substance use. So when in fact, it really just speaks to our level to engage people in a way that's meaningful to them. So I think the important part about that is what that demonstrates is, like you said, Mark, how isolating it can be for individuals who feel like they don't have a safe place to disclose what kind of struggles and challenges they might be encountering. Specifically in that transition age population, and Ryan's probably had some experience with this as well, adults maybe can't understand what we're going through at this stage of development that would lead us to some of these decisions. And if I share that, where do you send me? Do I go here? Do you have to share this with my parents? Where does that information go? And that can be scary and isolating. So a lot of the youth that we work with might not even be disclosing to friends that they're involved with substance use. There's an element of sometimes shame associated with that. So letting that population know who might be having some of their first experience with substance use in that age range, to let them know this is a space where you can share with us and build the community of support around that, to involve key players that are important to them, whether that is a parent or maybe an extended family member that you can disclose this to. Do you have other professionals, a teacher, a friend that you can bring into this space of recovery, so that we can work on helping you meet those motivators in a way that's safer for you, and that makes you feel more connected to the people around you.
Let's move into a little bit of the idea of recovery. I think, again, if we think about old school, sort of the thought was you have this thing and you need to go get treatment for it. You deal with what's inside of you through treatment, and then you go back out and you do your thing. You're part of the community again. And I think for me, one of the shifts or the mentality, the focus of recovery is really about connection. It's relational. It's about connecting to other people and to something bigger than yourself and purpose.
For me, recovery wasn't, of course, abstinence from drugs came, right? That was the key piece. The first thing I needed to do was stop using, right? The second thing I needed to do was get connected to a community bigger than myself that could kind of help guide me through the beginning steps of recovery and whatever that meant, right? I didn't know in the early stages what that meant. I just knew that I didn't want to use anymore, and I was grasping on to everything and anything that had some kind of security, like, NA, peer support meetings, started doing Bible studies. I was doing the most that I could do with all the time that I had available to incorporate myself, to thrust myself back into the community. Was it hard? Yes. Did I feel rejected at times? I really did. I felt out of place, especially when I stepped back into school. Right, and I had to go back into community college and just trying to do those things, returning into the workforce. And now I come into the workforce as a peer. I come into a professional work setting where that wasn't the case before. Before it was a manufacturing job or a laboring job. So recovery meant to me that entire process of just getting grounded in the workspace, getting grounded, in my church, getting grounded doing outreach, just finding myself, right? And it's recovery for me continues to evolve. The things that worked for me that work for me today aren't the same things that worked for me 9 years ago. I had to pick up some things, I had to let go some things, I had to go revisit some things. The good thing about where I'm at now in recovery is that I do know myself. I do know, like, hey, things are not going too well for you. You might want to reach out to your old sponsor, make a few meetings. Hey, that you're becoming a little bit unraveled. What about, spending some time in meditation and prayer, doing some things, maybe taking a mental wellness day. So now the self-awareness that I have throughout the years kicks in, but it also, what keeps me going is my sense of community. Right? It are the responsibilities that I have, not only to myself, but accountable to others. I have to show up for that soccer game for that kid, right? I have to show up to help this youth that I'm teaching him how to change the spark plugs in his car. I have to show up for my brother that said he just relapsed and he's trying to go right back into treatment. And he doesn't need me to go over there and kick his teeth in. He just needs somebody to understand, right? To talk to him and speak life to him. So recovery for me is all of that. I always say this, is that the same job that I do while I'm on the clock, catch me when I'm off the clock, I'm doing the exact same job. And that's how I know that what I'm doing is not only recovery based, but it's creating community. It's creating a place for somebody to be able to gather the same resources and for me to be there for somebody in the same capacity that other people were there for me in my early stages of recovery.
What you do for yourself has a reason, a purpose to it, because it helps you then show up for everybody else in your space. And I like what you said about your job and your passion are sort of really intermingled. What you do on the clock and what you just do in your life, or you just walking through life sort of the same way. And I think that's what we're sort of trying to get towards, is what does recovery look like in community?
I think for, the first probably 6 to 8 months of my recovery was meetings and my sponsor. That's really all it was. My only interaction was with people from those meetings. And that's what I needed then. It was almost mandatory for me to be able to get straightened out. And after about 8 months is when we got connected with the church in Philadelphia where we served. And I think what I learned there was there was folks that I could help because of my experiences, but there was also a lot of people there, a lot more mature than me, a lot more experienced than me, who began to mentor me as well. And what I realized was this give and take of community is actually where I productively was able to live out my recovery and kind of live day to day in those principles. And I think the reason why is because when you give back and when you also allow yourself to receive from others, it makes life bigger than you. It's what helps keep your ego from getting back in charge. Because once my ego gets back in charge, it'll plant a seed of negativity that will grow and grow. And this keeps the positive and the joyful out in front, because it requires a degree of humility to both serve and to allow someone to serve you. So, that time that I spent there became easily as important as any time I spent in meetings, in classes, in groups. And I just try to continue that now today, to be able to allow myself to give and receive in the community.
I liked what you said about giving and receiving, that mutuality of community.
I think too, there's so many pathways to recovery, right? There's no wrong door. Find what sticks, find what works for you, find your people. And I think like that concept too, like as I continued in my journey, has broadened too, like not just for me, but like thinking about other people and truly not being judgmental towards other people and what pathway they decide to take for their own journey, and providing those types of like resources and connection and encouragement and support. Because a big part of, what you see too, with addiction and struggling with substance use is the opposite of community and connection, because of shame, because of stigma, even with the young people, not being honest, like Mike was talking about. And I'm not even just talking about for the person, but even the families that are experiencing it and not getting, the help, the support that they deserve and need, because they're struggling in silence. Because stigma is like, it's nasty, right? Like it's a cycle. There's this division, us versus them, and like all that kind of stuff. And like, the wheels just spin, and like stigma and shame definitely prevents us from connecting with other people. Recovery started to become attractive to me because of people that were openly sharing about what they were experiencing, and welcoming me into that.
I'm struck by the fact that we have NA and AA. The last word is anonymous. Like somehow we still feel, or the public feels, that we need to protect the identity of people, or maybe we shouldn't share so much. And so I like what all of you guys have said about just being able to share openly with the community, because I think that's how the community starts to understand a couple of these important pieces, that it impacts all of us, and it's okay to talk about. That there doesn't have to be shame in it, because it's something it's part of our shared human experience. And that we have something to offer each other.
Yeah, because I appreciate so much being part of this conversation, listening to all three of you guys talk about that it's really about like the reciprocal giving and receiving of service. But it's also, like Ryan said, it's not a one-size-fits-all journey, and it also requires opportunity for people. So when you share your journey with other people, it provides them that opportunity to say, this is something I didn't know existed. This is an opportunity I didn't have before. So when you talk about kind of finding that purpose, the community, the connection, about how do we get out in front of people who are looking for an opportunity and provide them with a one-size-fits-one, and then have that reciprocal giving and receiving of service that provides you and them with purpose. So I thought that was just a really cool theme that tied through the conversation, because I think we have a lot of people that are looking for an opportunity, and without the conversation around reducing the stigma, and you kind of walk in that middle ground, right? It's like Ivan's talking about, like people are just, it's so normalized that what do? It's everywhere. And if you have that level of exposure, then is that a positive thing? But also we want to normalize it enough that it opens up conversation and opportunity for recovery. So where is that balance, and how do we start those conversations on a community level?
I think that that thread goes back to what Ryan had said earlier about, you talk about substance use or addiction, you talk about recovery, prevention and recovery all in the same. You can't separate those things out, and I think that's a good form of connecting all the dots for people. It feels to me like the next frontier for us is to say that the lived experience, whether it's in your own self or with somebody that you know and care about, somebody you love, that lived experience has something to offer the community at large beyond the issue of addiction. People have learned how to live with hard things. People have learned how to develop relationships and connections that create strength and resilience. because of that experience, but that experience is important beyond just the issue. I want us to think about, how does the lived experience in recovery have something to offer to the community at large? What are the lessons that you think are helpful to the larger community?
Well, I think there's principles, right? No matter what journey you're on, those principles are always a part of that person's redemption story. We need to look for those principles and pull those principles out, like hope and love and compassion. Those are the common threads that you'll find in somebody finding, their wellness. I became a certified peer specialist when I had 18 months in my own personal recovery journey, right? And from that point on, Mark, the blinders continue to just come further and further off, and the broader scope of this thing called recovery, I started to observe it and see it and experience it and honor it and respect it. You get what I mean? And if it weren't for that community too, the peer support community, it only made my recovery stronger.
Yes. I think the principles are sort of, they're universal, and they're things that everyone can tap into. I love that you use the word redemption. I think everybody who's walking around needs a little bit of redemption, or has found redemption, or is on the process to that. I think those words like love, hope, and grace are just really foundational, visceral parts of everyone's life. And so when you describe your process, which is good for you, and it's the way that you walk your path, the things that you bump into on your path are the things that are really valuable, not only to other people who are experiencing similar challenges, but to the rest of the community who might not realize how much they need that.
I was just going to say that I also, think I've had a lot of opportunities to, to help folks out with what I've learned from recovery who were not in recovery, and to be able to just kind of carry that into, it could be anything, people grieving loss. You could be volunteering at a food pantry or at a shelter. And, when people share with you the struggles they're going through, I mean, there's basic principles of recovery that cover everything. And a lot of people don't know about that because they've not had addiction issues. So I think that our experience in recovery can go so far beyond helping folks out with addiction issues, because some of these principles are basic principles of life. What can you control and what can't you control? Who's the higher power in this situation? Who do you talk to when you're on the edge? And if the answer is no one, what can you do to change that answer? These are basic things I learned at the root of my recovery that helped me, get clean and stay clean. But they're also kind of basic principles to a good, healthy life. So the opportunity to help out in the community because of a recovery experience is endless beyond just addiction.
Yeah. I like what you said about just sort of these are fundamental things in life. The idea of checking in with yourself, apologizing when you're wrong, making amends to other people, the sort of the disciplines of how we relate well to people, and how we monitor and manage ourselves in our relationships. These are all sort of part of what I'm describing as the experience of recovery actually equips you to live life in a different way, and that equipping that's born of experience actually is an asset to the community. The community, people everywhere in life can learn from the things that people in recovery have learned about themselves and about how they want to manage their own life, walk through their life on their path. We're going to wind down our time together, but I want to ask sort of just one more question, which is what are just some things that the community at large, people in the community, can do to support folks in their recovery or be connected to recovery movements or recovery activities in their community?
I would say, Mark, it all starts with conversation, right? If you're curious about something, if you need to know something, if you're not educated about something, just, information is key. Reach out to the people that have the information, right? Be open-minded when you see somebody struggling with addiction. That person just didn't arrive at that destination just like that. Something happened that person that you're seeing in front of you arrived to be that way. And care a little bit, care about your community, care about your neighbor. Say a kind word. Take initiative with seeking out resources, with knowing, hey, this is where I can get Narcan. Hey, this is where there's the nearest detox. This is the nearest warming center, because it's coming and it's in our community. And if we don't help our community and we don't stand in the gap for our community, who will?
For that, I would just say to be bold in stepping in and asking questions and offering to help, and to be very humble in listening, and to be open-minded, and to really just go into any conversation you have with not any foregone conclusion of what's right and what's wrong, and to be open to listening and learning.
Yeah, what everyone else said too, I would also just add, no shame, again, no shame, no stigma for yourself, for other people. There's always somebody. What I've learned through this experience, through this journey, personally and professionally, is that I'm not that unique. You know what I mean? There's always somebody that has a very similar story or a very similar experience. We feel so alone when we're in it, whatever that is, but there's always people out there that have had similar lived experiences that we can openly share with, and we can get those principles from and learn, how did you do it? Right? Well, tell me, how did you do it? And maybe I can take some of that and apply it. And I would also say, if you want to get involved, find a coalition to get involved with in your community, find your tribe, find the people that are out there doing some of this work, doing some outreach, doing some education, looking for trainings. I'm going to be at a church in Harleysville tonight, and it's for the community, right? So finding opportunities to get involved in places to connect. The recovery walk, for example, that we just had 2 weeks ago in the community. Not everyone there was a person in recovery or even a family member, and so I think it's just important that we get involved and be a part of these different awareness months. And that's the point of this kind of stuff, is giving people opportunities where they might feel like they don't have the opportunity to get involved, and ask questions, right? I would say that's the biggest thing. Be curious, ask questions, because I don't want to speak for everyone, but I can probably say that we all would super appreciate that if random people even asked us questions, about our journey and our recovery. I know I would, and openly share and try to want to connect people to it. So be curious, ask questions, and get involved. There's no wrong door.
Thanks, guys. This is great. My mantra takeaway is be curious and be humble. I think are two things that if we just all did that a lot, we would find a lot more connection that we have with each other. So thank you guys for this great conversation.
I just had a great time listening to everybody talking about their own journey and also the advice for others in the community. I think it's so valuable. And this is a conversation like this, a podcast that you can listen to and or watch to get information if you're not ready to ask a question yet, if you're not ready to show up to a walk and introduce yourself to someone and be curious, if you just want to feel it out a little bit, this is a good place to do that. And this might be the first step for somebody listening to this and having them take action from this. So I think just the value that this conversation brings to the community, to give people the green light, it's okay to reach out to people around you, ask questions, whether that's about addiction, whether it's about substance use, whether that's about mental health, recovery. It will touch your life at some point. And you can be curious about it and gather information, even if you haven't encountered it yet, because likely you have people around you that could benefit from your curiosity. So I appreciate very much the conversation today.
And that's a really good way for us to end, to just get to encourage people to continue to be curious, even if it hasn't quite touched them yet. At some point, that engagement will be beneficial to someone. So next month, we're going to continue this conversation in a different way, but very, very parallel, around recovery and mental health. And again, those things are very overlapping things, but we're going to continue and focus in a little bit more on recovery and mental health. So thank you guys for joining us. This was a great conversation, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope that you enjoyed hearing from people who are strengthening our communities every day. Search for and follow us on your preferred streaming platform to hear future episodes.